I'd like to share with you the most powerful, underutilized influencing strategy in the world today. For me, this is an absolute biggie. And by the way, that's my view on this particular strategy. And this strategy is called framing. So I'm about to share with you something that's gruesome, that's gory, but look, other people have heard it and survived and it's been all okay. That's framing, that's setting the scene. And this is the art, the capability of setting the scene. So let's actually really pull back the layers of what really influencing is all about, what communication is all about between two people, and see if we can hone and develop our framing skills as a result of this. As I said, this is the biggie. This is the biggie. You get framing, you become a better negotiator, a better influencer, a better husband, wife, partner, lover, friend, mum, dad, to be able to achieve great results. So in the center here, all communication is the process of gaining and giving information and details. We could call it the content. So a buyer is about to want to put an offer on a property, so we would gain and give information about that particular offer. Here's why I think this property is worth the full asking price, and here's why I think it's that. We'd gain and give that information. And finally, we'd come to a particular agreement. The interesting thing is, the way I receive the content of the communication has a huge amount to do with the quality of the frame that actually sits around this particular information. So the key thing, an aspect here, is what framework is sitting around this particular conversation. That means before we present price, how do we frame price? Before we present marketing, how do we frame it? How do we set the scene with this? And what's absolutely critical, when we get this part of the process correct, all of a sudden we go to another level of performance. So, quite simply, this is the frame. And there are three components to framing. The first one is a pre-frame. And I would like dialogue within your office to start being, how do you frame that? How do you pre-frame that? What is your pre-frame around that offer? What's your pre-frame to extract another offer from the buyer? What's your pre-frame around presenting price at the listing appointment? The second kind of framing is a reframe. Now really, objection handling is nothing more than a reframe. You're reframing an objection from being an issue to being an advantage, or at least neutralising the particular issue. So anytime you have a mini, what I call an uh-oh in a communication, you're actually changing the frame of reference. You need to. What you are expecting the client to be thinking, they're thinking something different. They might see marketing as a cost. Your goal is to shift it from a cost to seeing it as an investment to make sure we get the best possible price in the marketplace, that we leave no stone unturned in terms of maximising the exposure to get the right buyers to the property. And then finally is the next frame. And the next frame is where to from here. And important little note you may want to note down is always lead the next step. Never leave a communication without being clear on what the next step is in the process. I'll call you, I'll follow that up. We'll agree on tomorrow morning, we'll speak on the phone and clarify this point. We'll be in a position to honour this, sign off on this, put this in place, press the go button to make it happen. So let's have a look at some very, very simple pre-frames you can use pretty much straight away to start improving your communication. A simple example of this is, when you're with a buyer or a seller, you probably have got a number of questions you want to ask. Rather than going into question mode and potentially being perceived as an interrogator, what I'd like you to do is start utilising the pre-frame. So that I can help you best, do you mind if I ask you a few additional questions? Or, I'd love to get a better understanding of what you're looking for and what your needs are. Could I ask you some additional questions? We want to make sure that we give you the absolute best advice possible. Could I just ask you a couple of additional questions to really understand your situation and your needs a little bit more? The client's always going to say yes to those questions, and all of a sudden what's happened is you set the scene, you've framed, get ready, I'm about to ask you some questions. The expectation is clear, now you can go into questioning mode and the client is ready for it. They're expecting it. Plus, you've also set the scene around it. Now, if you can pre-frame things in and you can pre-frame things out of a conversation. A simple example of pre-framing out is, besides maximising the sale price, what are you looking for from me as your agent? What that does beautifully, it assumes that naturally my focus is really looking after your sale price, making sure that that's a given. Besides premium, getting your premium price, maximising the sale price, what are you looking for from me as your agent? It really does allow us to tune in and identify other components, because we've already said that that's a given that we're going to do. In a property management situation, besides really looking after this asset brilliantly well for you, what are you looking for from me as your agent? That assumes that that's a given. That's what's actually occurring there. A lot of my business comes from referral, just wondering who referred you to me. It pre-frames and sets up a beautiful context that most of my business comes from referral. And all of a sudden you can have a conversation now about why that's the case and about referrals. And they might say, no, it actually wasn't referred by you to you. It was the property just up the road that I saw. Or in actual fact, yeah, a colleague of mine suggested I give you a call, or a friend of mine said you've done a great job for them. Fantastic, great. Look, I'd like to say thank you to them. Who was it that shared those details? By the way, they're a great couple. I really loved actually working for them. I'm sure we're going to actually have a great working relationship too. Bang. So it's a pre-frame. Now, I've seen agents who just go and deliver an offer to an owner and say, here's the offer we've got. They don't set the scene. There's no pre-framing on it. It's ridiculous not to do that. But here's what we've been doing. This was the first offer, and this is what happened, and this is where we've got this particular buyer to. Now let's have a look at this. I think I found the buyer for your property. We're just slightly out in terms of price, but here's where they started and here's where we've got them to. Let's have a look at this. Boom. And now you're presenting an offer with a different kind of light. And literally what it's showing, the pre-frame in there says, I'm on your side, I've been working for you well and truly. Let's look at reframing. Reframing is that that we need to change the frame of reference. Now, you could turn around if a client says something, and you could say, no, you're wrong. It tends to be a deal breaker. So you've got to be more artful in your communication. Where you say, look, I totally get your point of view. Perhaps another way of looking at this is. So the key there is perhaps another way of looking at this. A slightly different approach to this situation would be, or could be this. So perhaps, or let's look at a different way of dealing with this. That's the first one I'd recommend you use. The second reframe is an oldie, but it's a goodie, and that is feel, felt, found. And if someone turns around and says, look, I'm slightly concerned about having a signboard on my property. Oh, tell me more about that. Well, you know, I think it's a privacy issue and all those sorts of things. Look, I understand how you feel. In fact, others have felt exactly the same way. However, what we've found is having a signboard can attract the passive buyers who happen to be walking the dog or driving along this particular street and go, I didn't know that property was on the market. They're not in search mode on the internet or flicking through the paper. And all of a sudden we've turned a passive buyer into an active buyer on your property. That could be the key that unlocks a new level of price performance that we can achieve for you, or at least put other buyers in competition to secure the best and the highest selling price possible for you. Feel, felt, found. Very simple, but very, very powerful piece of dialogue that links into where the client's coming from. And the framework there is understand how you feel, right? Empathizing with them. Others have felt that way. You're not alone. Other people have had that same set of circumstances issue. And here's what we found. Here's what we've done with it. And it almost always will lead to a case study or a recommendation as to how we've addressed that particular issue. And finally, next framing. You'd be correct in assuming next framing is really an advanced pre-frame. But if you're doing a two-step listing approach where you meet the client and greet the client and sit down and have a chat with them, and you're coming back with a report and a series of recommendations, you want to set the scene for that. You want to let the client know that here's what I'm going to recommend we do. We're going to go away, we're going to put some additional research into a report, discuss with my colleagues, document the recommendations, so when we meet on Tuesday, we can walk through those in detail, answer any additional questions you've got, and typically at that point in time, my clients are ready to give me the green light to go ahead and market their property. Is that okay with you? Now, you could be bringing an objection forward where they say, well, I'm not sure if we're going to be ready to go. Oh, okay, tell me more about that. You're better off finding about that now than at the end of the process, at the end of the second meeting, because you may be able to do something or switch it around or change it or do it differently. Framing, incredibly powerful. And by the way, you cannot do too much work on improving your framing. The better you are at framing, the better you are at influencing, the better you are at negotiating, deal making, and making things come together in a powerful way. It is artful, it is sophisticated, it is simple, it is super effective. Enjoy the discussion, enjoy putting framing into action in your marketplace.